Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your source material, history, economics, geology, you name it, and we really get into it, pulling out the essential knowledge so you get the full picture fast. Today, we're tackling the North Sea.
Right.
Now, if you just glance at a map, well, it looks pretty modest, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Geographically, it's just a marginal sea of the Atlantic. Our
Yeah.
sources sometimes use that German term, Randmeer.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, culturally, economically, calling it marginal feels almost insulting. For the people who lived there, fought there, traded there, it's always been a Schicksalsmeer, a sea of destiny.
And what hits you straight away is this massive paradox. You've got its physical size versus its economic clout. It's roughly the size of France,
Okay.
but that's only, 0.2% of the world's total ocean surface? Tiny, really.
Tiny, but incredibly powerful.
Exactly. Mighty, as you said it.
Mighty barely covers it. If you look at the numbers today, I mean, this small sea is this absolute economic giant that Europe just completely relies on. Our sources are showing something like, still, $150 million in oil revenue coming out of it every single day.
Every day. It's staggering.
And then there's the shipping. Nearly a quarter of all global shipping traffic goes through these waters. A quarter.
It's not just the economy either, is it? It's a vital ecosystem. You're looking at about 5% of the entire global fish catch coming from this relatively small area. That's around 3 million tons of fish a year.
Wow.
But all this wealth, this life, it's constantly overshadowed by danger. The North Sea is, well, it's feared. It's deeply unpredictable, often violent,
Right.
and that forces people to adapt, to innovate, to struggle. It really hammers home that old saying, the sea gives and the sea takes away.
Okay, so let's really unpack this story.
Mhm.
We need to trace the identity of this sea right from its very beginnings. When it wasn't even a sea, it was land with mammoths roaming around.
Hard to imagine.
Through the Romans, their big wins and even bigger failures there. The Vikings, terrifying, but also pretty savvy. Right up to today, with this huge modern battle against the coast just crumbling away.
It's quite a sweep of history.
It really is. Let's dive in. Right, so to really get the North Sea as this sea of destiny, we have to start with something pretty fundamental. Geologically speaking, it's brand new, it's a baby.
That's the crucial starting point, yeah. Geologically, it's an infant. If you just rewind 12,000 years, which isn't long in Earth terms, the sea level was way, way lower, maybe up to 120 meters lower than today.
So you wouldn't be paddling on a beach, you'd be standing on this vast, cold plain, like a tundra.
Exactly, a step.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
If you were standing on the coast of, say, Germany or the Netherlands 12,000 years ago, the actual sea would have been 600 kilometers further north.
Mm-hmm.
This whole area. It wasn't water. It was Doggerland, a land bridge connecting to Britain. And you'd have woolly mammoths, reindeer, giant bison just wandering about where massive container ships sail today.
And Doggerland vanished pretty dramatically with the end of the last ice age. All that meltwater from the glaciers, a colossal amount, just poured in, raising sea levels incredibly fast.
Swallowed the land bridge.
Yeah.
Yep. Swallowed the land bridge, created the sea we know now. And this massive sea level rise, it directly formed key landmarks we see today, like the island of Sylt. Our sources say it only popped up about 8,000 years ago.
So the sea literally made the coasts.
It did. And then it immediately started trying to take them back. It's this constant creation and destruction.
And the thing that really defined this new young sea, the thing that absolutely baffled outsiders, especially anyone coming from the calm, predictable Mediterranean, was the tides. The sheer power and confusion of the tides.
Oh, the tides are the North Sea's signature. Absolutely fundamental. Imagine being a Roman soldier used to the Med where tides are, minimal, almost non-existent.
Right.
Then you arrive here and the water level shoots up and down by meters twice a day. It must seem terrifying, almost supernatural. We know it's down to geodesy, the gravity of the moon and sun.
Pulling the water around.
Yeah, creating that regular cycle. 2 highs, 2 lows, roughly every 25 hours. But it's the scale of the change here that's so dramatic, isn't it? The speed, the range.
Yeah.
6 hours draining away, then 6 hours rushing back in. Why is it so much more extreme in the North Sea?
It's mostly down to the shape, the geometry of the sea itself. First off, it's incredibly shallow. Average depth is only about 90 meters. That's nothing compared to the big oceans.
Okay.
And second, you've got the continental shelf acting like this huge, flat funnel, especially down towards the Dutch, German, and Danish coasts.
Right, I see.
So when the tidal wave, the bulge of water, comes in from the Atlantic and hits this shallow, narrowing basin, it gets squeezed, compressed. And this shallowing effect causes a massive resonance, amplifying the tide. You get ranges of several meters in some spots.
Wow.
It feels alive because Unlike the deep ocean, you can see it moving constantly, rapidly.
And this instability, this weirdness, it leads us to one of the earliest and maybe most famous descriptions of the area. From Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist.
Ah, Pliny, yes. His account is just brilliant. He absolutely nails the mystery and the menace of it all.
What did he say?
He described it as this confusing landscape, neither properly seen or properly land. Think about that from a Roman military perspective.
Yeah, how do you fight on that?
Exactly. You're trained for solid ground or predictable water, and suddenly you're faced with mudflats, quicksand, channels that appear and disappear, and then this sudden aggressive rush of water coming back in. Organized warfare. Almost impossible.
So it really shaped how the locals saw the sea too, as this tricky, dangerous force.
Profoundly. And this constant threat, it forced this incredible tradition of human resilience, of pushing back. People didn't just accept their fate, they started building, long before the Romans even showed up.
Building against the sea.
Precisely. This is where you see the genius of the coastal people, especially the Frisians. You look at the Halligan, those tiny little inhabited islands off the German coast. They're sitting on these entirely artificial mounds called wharfen.
Right, the wharfen.
These weren't just slightly raised house platforms. They were massive earthworks, painstakingly built up over generations, specifically to create safe havens from the storm surges.
And Pliny noticed this too, right? He wrote about the people living near the Weser estuary.
He did. He called them a lamentable people, which sounds harsh.
Yeah.
But he was describing their struggle. Forced to live on these high mounds they build by hand, calculated to the measure of the highest flood.
He painted quite a picture.
Oh, incredibly vivid, almost surreal. He said when the storm surge came and covered everything, they were like sailors trapped in their huts on these little islands of earth.
Wow.
But then when the water went out, leaving these vast mudflats, they were like castaways stranded in this weird half-land, half-water world. He even said their houses looked like beached ships on the mud.
And the materials they used.
Yeah.
It wasn't stone or anything fancy.
No, nothing imported. It speaks volumes about their resourcefulness. The sources confirm the wharfen were built from what they had. Compacted organic waste, leftover grain, animal manure, household rubbish.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Just rubbish.
Layered and packed down over years, decades, centuries, creating these incredibly durable defenses against a sea that could smash concrete. It's amazing.
That really embodies that Frisian proverb, doesn't it?
It perfectly captures it. This 2,000-year struggle, demanding a place to stand where the sea says no. God created the sea, the Frisian the coast. It's this huge, proud statement. If destiny is shaped by the sea, well, the people here are going to grab destiny by the horns and shape it themselves.
And that defiance, that need to shape their own destiny, it wasn't just against the water, was it? Because soon they faced another overwhelming force, Rome.
Absolutely. Rome had conquered the Mediterranean, made it Mare Nostrum, our sea. So naturally, they looked north. The ambition was huge. Make the entire North Sea coast Roman, secure everything up to the Elbe River.
And they tried. Around 12 BC, Drusus, the elder Emperor Augustus' stepson, led a major campaign. These were experienced legions, remember. They'd crushed pretty much everyone else.
Battle-hardened troops.
Yet they were stopped. Not by another army, but by the mud.
The environment itself. East of the Rhine, the legions just got bogged down, literally. Reeds, high water, swamps, those unpredictable mudflats. The exact landscape Pliny described.
So, logistics must have been a nightmare.
Oh, undoubtedly. Modern researchers point to massive supply problems as the real practical reason for the failure. But Drusus couldn't exactly go back to Rome and say, sorry, Augustus, we got stuck in the mud. He needed a better story.
Right. He needed to save face.
Exactly. And this is where the North Sea immediately becomes mythical, a place of omens and excuses. Drusus came back claiming he hadn't failed because of mundane reasons. Oh no, he'd been stopped by a risen. A giantess.
A giantess, seriously.
Yep. A woman of superhuman size, according to his report. And she supposedly warned him, the end of your life is already near. So naturally, he had to retreat.
That sounds incredibly convenient. A supernatural excuse for a military blunder. Did anyone in Rome actually buy that?
Well, buy it in our modern sense. Maybe not literally everyone. But it worked within their system. You have to remember how deeply superstitious the Romans were. Omens, sacrifices, divine signs. These were critical before any major undertaking.
Okay.
So for a top commander like Drusus, blaming a supernatural event, a giantess, was the perfect out. It wasn't poor planning, it was fate. The gods intervened. It gave him good karma, preserved his honor, and made the retreat acceptable back home.
Clever politics, then.
Very. But despite getting stuck in the swamps, Drusus did manage to sort of co-opt the locals initially. He made allies of the Frisians. They just had to pay a tribute.
And initially, it wasn't too bad.
No, Tacitus tells us it was quite moderate, just cattle hides, which the army needed anyway for shields, tents, that sort of thing. Manageable.
But then came the next wave of Roman administrator.
Yes. And they were, let's say, less diplomatic, less far-sighted. They decided to crank up the demands. Specifically, they started demanding larger hides.
Larger hides.
Exactly. The local Frisian cattle were naturally small breeds. It wasn't like the Frisians could just magically make bigger cows. It was an impossible demand from the start.
This sounds like it's heading towards disaster.
It was. Tacitus's account here is just brutal. The Frisians were desperate. First, they paid with all the cattle they had. But the demand for large hides continued. Since they couldn't meet it, the Romans forced them to pay with their women and children, selling them into slavery to cover the impossible tax.
That's horrific. Utterly dehumanizing.
It was the breaking point, the absolute final straw. When Rome sent soldiers to enforce this last impossible collection, the Frisians snapped. They revolted with incredible violence.
What did they do?
They captured the Roman soldiers sent to collect the tribute and crucified them.
Crucified them against Rome.
An extreme act of defiance. They were basically saying, we will not be erased, we will not surrender our dignity. They were openly challenging the most powerful military on earth. It sent a clear message. The North Sea coast wasn't going to be easily tamed, not by nature and not by Rome.
Okay, so Rome learns the hard way that marching legions through the swamps of Germania is, well, a bad idea. Too costly, too difficult. So they shift their strategy. They realize the North Sea itself can be a highway to a much richer prize, Britannia.
Exactly. About 100 years after Julius Caesar's sort of initial exploratory poke across the channel, Rome commits to a full-scale invasion. This is 43 AD. We're talking a massive force, 6 legions, around 20,000 professional soldiers.
And this wasn't just about planting a flag. This was about resources.
Absolutely. Hard economics drove this. Britannia was known for its resources, especially tin. Tin was absolutely vital for making bronze, the key military and industrial alloy for Rome.
But the invasion immediately threw up this huge clash of military cultures, didn't it, between the Romans and the native Celtic tribes?
A massive clash. On one side, you have the Roman army. Our sources call it a disciplined killing machine, built for efficiency, organization, massed power. Their whole tactic was about breaking the enemy line, disciplined hacking and stabbing, ruthlessly effective.
And the Celts.
Completely different ethos. For the Celtic warriors, it was all about the heroic duel, personal glory, individual renown. A Celtic leader wanted personal fame, to be the hero in single combat.
Whereas the Roman general just wanted to wipe out the enemy army.
Precisely. Destroy them as a functioning unit. The Roman playbook was always lure the Celts onto open ground where Roman discipline and formations would just overwhelm individual bravery. Celtic heroism, however fierce, was ultimately futile against the organized power of the legions.
The sources are pretty clear on this. A Celt might win a one-on-one fight.
Sure.
But in a battle of strategy and organization, the Roman machine just rolled over them.
Overwhelmingly. And this successful invasion meant the North Sea, at least its western and southern parts, became firmly Roman for centuries.
And they didn't just occupy, they Romanized.
Totally. Rapidly and thoroughly. Rutupiae, that's Richborough today, became the key port, the main supply base. It controlled the western North Sea routes. And the Roman way of life just spread everywhere. Baths, temples, arenas, little mini Romes popping up all over Britain.
But you mentioned this had a darker side. It wasn't just about bringing nice baths. It was about erasing identity.
That's the critical analysis here. Roman assimilation was ruthless, wasn't just conquest, it was cultural absorption. Building all those grand structures, imposing Latin, promoting Roman gods. One historian calls it a very dark weapon.
A dark weapon? How so?
The goal was to make the conquered people forget their own past, stop speaking their own language, stop worshiping their own gods, abandon their customs, to make them believe that the Roman way was the only civilized way. It's a demonstration of absolute power that inevitably breeds resentment and eventually fuels resistance.
So by about 117 AD, the empire is at its peak. Southern and western North Sea coasts are Roman. But even then, there's this fatal flaw lurking within the system, isn't there? Something that will eventually lead to collapse in this region.
Yes, a fundamental flaw rooted in how they maintain their military. The empire became overstretched, relied heavily on its provinces, and faced internal pressures. So increasingly, they outsourced their defense.
Outsourced, you mean?
They started recruiting soldiers from the very peoples they had conquered. Essentially, hiring foreigners to do their dirty work, as one source puts it,
So they're training soldiers from outside.
while simultaneously disarming their own Roman citizens. They stopped relying on a citizen army and started relying on recruits from the frontiers. Jutes, Angles, Saxons,
Hmm.
many from right there on the North Sea coast.
Okay, I can see where this is going. The people they're paying to defend the borders suddenly realize two things.
Exactly. 1, the Romans inside the borders are incredibly rich. 2, the Romans themselves are militarily weak because they're not the ones fighting anymore.
The mercenaries know the layout, they know the tactics, and they know the target is rich and vulnerable.
Precisely. For these recruits, many from modern Schleswig-Holstein military service became effectively paid reconnaissance for an invasion. As the 5th century arrived, Rome's ability to pay its troops and defend its borders crumbled, and the Anglo-Saxons just moved in.
Took over. Settled England right amongst the ruins of Roman Britain.
Yeah, they established what the sources call a much simpler peasant way of life, farming amidst the crumbling villas and abandoned forts.
But one Roman legacy did survive, and even thrived amidst the chaos: Christianity. It had taken root among the native Romano-Britons.
Right. And this survival amidst the influx of pagan Anglo-Saxons gives rise to one of the most powerful and enduring myths in Western culture, the legend of King Arthur.
Arthur, the Christian king fighting the pagan invaders.
Exactly. The artist myth becomes this necessary wish image, especially for the monks writing history later. They needed a hero.
Why was it so necessary? Was it just religious cheerleading?
It was deeper than that, I think. It was about creating a narrative of survival during a time of complete upheaval, the Dark Ages. The sources suggest the story as we know it, Arthur, Camelot, Excalibur pulled from the stone, wasn't really written down until the late 9th century.
Much later.
Much later. In the centuries between the Roman collapse and then, the cultural memory was fractured. The monks needed a powerful story to inspire hope, to bridge the gap, to show that Christian civilization, Romano-British identity, had survived the onslaught, protected by this legendary figure.
So the sources are pretty firm on this. While there were definitely pockets of Romano-British resistance fighting back,
Oh, for sure. Real people fought and died resisting.
but a single great Christian leader named Arthur uniting the defense of Britain.
There's just no convincing historical evidence for it. It appears to be a powerful, necessary myth, an invention born from the trauma of collapse and the need for continuity. It really shows how the struggle for the North Sea shaped not just politics and borders, but imagination and legend, too.
Now, before Christianity really took hold and then had to fight for survival, the communities around the North Sea shared this older, powerful pantheon of gods. We're talking about figures like Odin.
Wotan, yeah, the All-Father, the highest god, famously one-eyed because he sacrificed an eye for wisdom, for foresight.
And Thor, or Donar, as he was known on the continent, master of thunder and storms. Hugely important for people living by the sea, you'd imagine.
Absolutely. Probably the most immediately relevant and perhaps feared deity for coastal communities facing those unpredictable North Sea storms. Their whole religion was deeply connected to nature, to battle, to the forces around them.
And we have archaeological evidence for their practices.
We do. Sites like Thorsberger Moor, which was a major sanctuary up in Angel in modern Germany, they've yielded incredible finds. Offerings given to the gods captured enemy weapons, valuable goods, horses.
And darker things.
Yes. Disturbingly, evidence of human sacrifice, too. It was a religion that reflected the harsh realities of their world.
And Tacitus, the Roman historian, he noted something unique about how they worshipped, didn't he? No temples.
That's right. He observed that the Germanic tribes believed their gods were too immense, too powerful to be confined by walls or contained within buildings.
So worship happened outdoors.
Yes, in sacred groves of trees, or maybe facing the power of the sea itself. They felt the god's presence in the natural world, not inside man-made structures.
But this old religion, Odin's rule, it was eventually challenged. Christianity started making inroads, seriously, from 597 AD onwards. Pope Gregory the Great sent monks to England.
40 monks, yeah. And they had a smart strategy, dictated by Gregory himself. Missionization from above.
Yeah.
Convert the leaders first. Convert the chieftains, the kings. The idea was, if the leader converts, his people, his followers, will likely follow suit. A top-down approach.
And the missionaries themselves played a key role.
Absolutely. They weren't necessarily old, scholarly types. Often they were young, incredibly fervent, charismatic figures. And crucially, they seemed utterly indifferent to death. In fact, many actively sought martyrdom.
Really, they wanted to die.
It sounds strange to us, but yes, this absolute conviction, this willingness, even eagerness to die for their god. The sources suggest this profoundly impressed the pagan kings. They saw a kind of spiritual intensity, maybe even mistook it for a form of spiritual warrior energy, like their own berserkers. It resonated, strangely.
But this Christian advance, it hit a wall. A brutal, shocking interruption came in 793 AD, the raid on Lindisfarne, Holy Island.
Lindisfarne, the spiritual and cultural heart of Northumbria of northern England, a hugely wealthy monastery, a major pilgrimage destination full of treasures.
And then one day, June 8th, ships appear.
Dragging ships, emerging from the mist. For the Christian monks writing about it later, this was unthinkable. Their worldview just shattered. As one chronicler wrote, no Christian warrior would ever dare attack a monastery. It was sacrilege beyond comprehension.
But these raiders weren't Christians, and the sacredness meant nothing to them.
Nothing at all. For these sea warriors, Lindisfarne was, as one source puts it quite bluntly, basically a self-service store for treasures.
Self-service, wow.
It was packed with easily portable wealth, silver chalices, jeweled reliquaries, valuable embroidered vestments, plus, large cellars full of wine.
Right.
And we get these incredible, almost comical, if it weren't so tragic, anecdotes from the chronicles. Descriptions of Vikings getting drunk on monastery wine and running around wearing the priest's elaborate robes flapping in the wind. It was chaos, violence, and profound cultural insult rolled into one.
And the Christian world reacted with horror. They portrayed the raiders not just as enemies, but as monsters, demons.
They did. They created this powerful nightmare image. They mythologized the Vikings into something almost inhuman, these creatures of Satan.
Why? What was the purpose of making them seem like monsters?
It served a really important psychological and political function. If you're being defeated, raided constantly by creatures from hell, by the devil's own spawn, well, it's not really your fault, is it?
Ah, I see. It justifies the losses.
Exactly. It excuses military failure. You can't be expected to win against literal monsters. It allowed the Christian kingdoms to frame their defeats in a way that preserved honor and deflected blame.
Okay, so that brings us to the term Viking itself. We need to be careful here,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't one people.
Correct. That's a crucial historical correction. There was no single Viking nation. The Old Norse word Vikinger just meant essentially a sea warrior, someone on a long journey, often for raiding or trading. They came from different areas, Norway, Denmark, what's now Schleswig-Holstein in Germany.
So they were united more by culture and technology than by a single origin.
Precisely. And the key technology was their ships. The dragon boats, the long ships, they were revolutionary.
How so?
Well, starting around the 8th century, they mastered the use of the square sail. And crucially, they figured out how to waterproof the canvas, probably using animal fats, oils. This, combined with their ship design, the shallow draft, the strong but flexible clinker-built hull, allowed them to do something other ships of the time couldn't do effectively. Sail against the wind, not just with it. They could tack.
That's a huge advantage.
Game-changing. It meant they weren't just limited by wind direction. Their superior ships meant they could cross the North Sea to England in less than 3 days in good conditions. They could strike faster, deeper, and more unexpectedly than anyone before.
And their navigation was different, too. They didn't see the North Atlantic as just this terrifying empty space.
No, they mentally reframed it. They saw it as almost an inland sea, dotted with useful islands, the Shetlands, the Faroes, Iceland. These islands acted like stepping stones.
Reducing the fear.
Exactly. Reducing the psychological fear of the open ocean and providing navigational markers and places to restock. This perspective, this confidence on the water, is what allowed them to push west to Greenland and eventually, incredibly, to North America 500 years before Columbus.
Amazing. They were called the inventors of the Blitzkrieg. Fast, devastating raids.
Yes, but we need to qualify that. It wasn't reckless charging. The Blitzkrieg analogy works in terms of speed and shock, but their approach was actually governed by very intelligent risk management.
So not just bloodthirsty berserkers charging wildly.
That's largely a myth, or at least a massive exaggeration. Think about it. If you're raiding a huge, powerful kingdom like the Frankish Empire with maybe only a few hundred ships, you can't afford to be reckless. That's suicide.
Right.
The Vikings were all about maximizing profit while minimizing risk. They picked their targets carefully. They only fought battles they were pretty sure they could win quickly. If things looked too dangerous, if strong resistance showed up, they'd just hoist the sail and vanish back into the sea.
Strategic withdrawals.
Absolutely. Their core identity wasn't just warrior, it was strategic opportunist. And perhaps most importantly, it was business.
Right, because the raiding warrior is only half the story. The other half is trade. And the prime example is Haithabu.
Haithabru. Hedeby, in modern Schleswig-Holstein. By the mid-10th century, this was a major urban center, maybe 1,000 permanent inhabitants.
And the Arab chronicler at Tartushi he visited.
He did, and he described it rather wonderfully as a very large city at the far end of the world, and he noted, crucially, that the actual warriors, the raiders, were only a small fraction of the people there. Hekabu was a city of artisans, craftspeople, and above all, merchants, focused on making things, buying things, selling things.
Its location was key, wasn't it, between the North Sea and the Baltic?
Perfectly positioned, a strategic choke point for trade routes. And the archaeology there is just stunning. It shows this vast network.
What kind of goods?
Everything. Glass and weapons from the Frankish lands, beautiful silks from China, mercury from Spain, spices from the Orient, amber from the Baltic coast. And sadly, slaves were also a major commodity.
Wow, truly global.
And they were provisioning their own long voyages, too. We find evidence of preserved fish, dried and salted cod, stockfish, clipfish essential for those long sea journeys. The people running this city weren't just thugs. They were sophisticated, risk-taking entrepreneurs who understood markets stretching all the way to the Black Sea and beyond.
So the Viking Age was really driven by this powerful commercial engine, maybe hidden behind some very effective, terrifying PR.
That's a great way to put it. Savvy PR for a fundamentally commercial enterprise. And we absolutely have to bust that final myth, the horned helmets.
I never wore them.
Never.
Yeah.
Pure 19th century opera costume invention. Completely impractical in a real fight. They were pragmatic warrior merchants, not cartoon characters.
Okay, so we've traced this arc. 10,000 years of geology shaping the sea, empires rising and falling on its shores, the Viking trade networks. But that fundamental struggle, the one Pliny saw 2,000 years ago, humanity versus this unstable, unpredictable sea that hasn't gone away, has it? It's still happening right now.
Relentlessly. That volatility is still the sea's defining trait. It remains treacherous. Those hidden sandbanks, they're not static. They're constantly shifting, moving. The entire seabed is in perpetual motion.
Which must be a nightmare for navigation.
A constant headache, requires endless mapping, charting, dredging. Because those same shifting sands are always trying to silt up harbors and shipping channels. Nothing is permanent out there.
And you see this most dramatically, perhaps, on the coast itself. Take Sylt, that German tourist island. Hugely popular, nearly 1 million visitors a year, but it was literally being eaten away. Consumed by wind and waves. There's a German word for it, Ablundungsprozess. Coastal erosion on a massive scale.
It's a shocking rate of loss,
Yeah.
especially at the southern tip, the Hernum Odd, where the currents are particularly strong. Sylt loses, on average, about 1 million cubic meters of sand every single year.
1 million cubic meters, that's hard to even visualize.
It is, and the speed is terrifying. We have documented cases of houses that were built, say, a kilometer inland just a generation or two ago. Now they're only a few hundred meters from the waves at high tide. The coast is just retreating.
But people have tried to starve it, obviously. Build defenses.
Of course. Early attempts involved building heavy, fixed structures, concrete breakwaters, seawalls, groins. But they largely failed. The North Sea, during a major storm surge, it just laughs at concrete. It finds a way around or under, or simply smashes it apart.
So what's the modern approach? How do they fight back now?
The main strategy since the 1970s is something called beach nourishment. It's a colossal, ongoing, and incredibly expensive engineering project.
Beach nourishment, what does that involve?
Basically, they use specialized dredging ships, spoolshift, to suck up sand from the seabed further offshore, usually about 8 kilometers out.
Okay.
Then they pump this sand, mixed with seawater, through huge pipelines back onto the eroding beaches. Bulldozers then spread it out.
And so they're literally replacing the sand that the sea washes away.
Exactly. They're pumping back roughly that same 1 million cubic meters of sand every single year just to try and hold the current coastline, maintain the status quo.
That must cost a fortune.
Hundreds of millions of euros over the decades. And it raises huge questions, doesn't it? About sustainability, about cost, about whether this is a genuine long-term solution or just delaying the inevitable retreat against an overwhelmingly powerful natural force.
That economic fight against the sea, though.
Yeah.
It's also shifted focus recently, hasn't it? It's not just about defense anymore, it's about power generation.
Yes, this is arguably the biggest economic transformation happening in the North Sea right now. It's rapidly moving from being a fossil fuel basin to becoming Europe's powerhouse for renewable energy, offshore wind,
Because the conditions are ideal.
some of the best in the world. Consistently strong winds, and critically, that shallow depth makes building turbine foundations feasible, though still very challenging. Countries like the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, they're investing billions in building these enormous offshore wind farms, aiming for tens, eventually hundreds of gigawatts of clean power.
So it's a modern echo of that old struggle, demanding innovation to harness the sea's power rather than just defend against it.
Absolutely. Building these massive structures out there, dealing with the tides, the storms, the shifting seabed, it's an incredible engineering feat. It connects right back to that Frisian spirit of asserting human will against the elements.
And meanwhile, it's still a vital trade route.
One of the busiest on Earth, linking huge ports like Rotterdam, Hamburg, Antwerp. So now you have this incredibly complex maritime environment, dense shipping lanes, oil and gas platforms, and now these sprawling wind farms. Managing that safely requires constant monitoring and regulation. It's a very crowded, high-stakes piece of water.
Yet, despite all the challenges, the danger, over 80 million people still live along its coasts today, drawn by the sea's opportunities.
They are. You see modern examples of adapting to the sea, like the big sailing center near the Alder River estuary in the UK, or even older feats like the pier at Southend-on-Sea.
The longest pier in the world, right?
Yep, built 130 years ago specifically so large ships could dock even at low tide when the vast mudflats were exposed. It's always been about finding ways to live with and profit from this demanding sea.
It puts the Vikings and Romans into perspective, doesn't it? Just episodes in this much longer 10,000-year story.
Exactly. The North Sea has seen empires crumble, it's broken world powers, it's helped others conquer the globe, and the ability of its people to innovate, whether building mounds from manure or giant wind turbines, that's the real testament to its power as a sea of destiny. It constantly forces change. #tag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what really stands out is the sheer resilience and ingenuity this seemingly small sea demands. It's still this huge economic engine for Europe, but it's layered with these fascinating echoes of the past. Rome's failures, Arthurian myth-making, the pragmatic reality behind the Viking terror.
It remains fundamentally unpredictable, changeable, sometimes deadly, and maybe that's why it's so defining for Europe. That constant struggle, land versus sea. Pliny saw it with the people on their wharf 2 millennia ago.
And we see it today with the fight to save silt.
Exactly. It's this dangerous beauty that just keeps pushing human innovation, forcing us to adapt and never lets us get complacent.
And that constant push, that struggle, it leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. The sea, the North Sea, it's always going to shape Europe. It forces us to adapt, to innovate. But when you look at the sheer scale of the effort today, pumping millions of tons of sand just to hold a coastline, investing billions to build wind farms in such a hostile, shifting environment, can we really ever conquer this sea? Or is the future of the North Sea coast always going to be this cycle of temporary gain, inevitable loss, and constant costly recapture? Is it a battle we fight or a dance we learn?
A profound question for the future.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the North Sea's incredible history and enduring power. We hope it sparks your own curiosity to explore more about this critical, fascinating part of the world.